My son Milo was 4 years old when he walked up to the grill at our family 4th of July barbecue, held out his paper plate, and asked my brother for a burger. And I watched my brother look down at him and say, loudly enough for the entire backyard to hear, "Those are only for kids with real Bennett blood, buddy. Ask your mom to make you something else." My name is Corinne Bennett, 31 years old, and Milo is my son from a relationship before I remarried into stability. A sweet, sturdy little boy who had spent his entire short life believing, correctly, that he belonged fully and completely in this family. Right up until the exact moment my brother Desmond decided a backyard full of aunts, uncles, and cousins needed a lesson in exactly whose children counted. I want to tell you honestly that I didn't scream. I walked across that yard, took the plate gently from Milo's hands, and told him, in the calmest voice I could manage, that Uncle Desmond was joking and that I'd make him whatever he wanted inside. Then I settled him at the kitchen table with a peanut butter sandwich and walked back outside, because I needed my brother to understand, immediately and unambiguously, exactly what he had just done. "You don't get to say that to my son," I told him, my voice low enough that only the small cluster of relatives near the grill could hear it. "Not as a joke, not ever." Desmond rolled his eyes in that particular way he'd perfected over 34 years of being the family's favored son, the one my parents had always excused, always funded, always protected from consequences the rest of us were expected to absorb without complaint. "Relax, Corinne. It's a barbecue joke. Everyone knows what I meant." What he meant, as it turned out, was something considerably more calculated than an ordinary careless joke, and I discovered exactly how calculated 3 weeks later, when my mother, attempting to smooth things over during an uncomfortable phone call, let slip a detail that reframed the entire incident in a light I hadn't expected. "Desmond's been under a lot of pressure," she said. "The trust fund distribution meeting is coming up next month, and he's worried the family attorney is going to raise questions about who exactly qualifies as a direct descendant for the purposes of the original trust language." I sat with that information for a long moment before I understood what she was actually telling me. Our grandfather's family trust, established decades earlier, distributed a meaningful portion of its annual income, specifically to direct Bennett descendants. A category our family had always informally understood to include every child born into the extended family, regardless of the specific legal relationship, myself and Milo included, since I was a full biological Bennett even if Milo's father wasn't. Desmond, it turned out, had spent the past several months quietly working with a sympathetic estate attorney to argue for a narrower interpretation of direct descendant, ahead of the upcoming distribution meeting, one that would exclude Milo from future trust benefits entirely, on the technical grounds that he lacked Bennett bloodline through his father's side, while conveniently continuing to include Desmond's own stepdaughter from his second marriage, a child with no Bennett blood whatsoever. Under a separate provision covering legally recognized dependents of primary beneficiaries. The barbecue comment, I realized with a slow, cold clarity, hadn't been a careless joke at all. It had been a test balloon, a way of gauging the family's reaction to exactly the kind of exclusionary language Desmond was quietly trying to build into a formal legal argument that would benefit his own household while cutting mine out entirely. I hired an attorney of my own within the week, a sharp, unflappable woman named Odalise Ferreira, who reviewed the original trust documents and confirmed something that made Desmond's entire strategy look considerably less clever than he apparently believed it to be. "The original trust language doesn't actually support the narrow interpretation your brother's team is pushing," Odalise told me, laying the 70-year-old founding documents across her desk. "It defines direct descendant, using language your great-grandfather clearly intended to be inclusive of all children raised within the family unit, regardless of biological paternity. There's actually a specific clause here addressing exactly this scenario, likely because it wasn't uncommon in your grandfather's generation either. Desmond's argument doesn't just exclude Milo, Corinne. If a judge applied his narrow interpretation consistently, it would also exclude his own stepdaughter, whom he's simultaneously trying to protect under a separate provision that directly contradicts the argument he's making about your son. I want to be honest about how satisfying it felt, sitting in that office, understanding that my brother's calculated cruelty had been built on a legal argument so internally contradictory, it threatened to undermine his own daughter's inheritance the moment anyone examined it closely enough. I brought this contradiction to the family attorney myself, 2 weeks before the scheduled distribution meeting, calmly and without the dramatic confrontation Desmond clearly expected, given how our barbecue conversation had gone. I simply laid out Odalys's analysis, the original trust language, and a direct question. Did the family attorney intend to apply Desmond's narrow interpretation consistently to every similarly situated child in the family, including his own stepdaughter, or was this argument specifically, selectively designed to exclude only my son? The family attorney, to his credit, recognized immediately how legally precarious Desmond's selective argument actually was, and recommended to my parents, as trustees, that the original inclusive interpretation be formally reaffirmed, rather than risk a legal challenge that could unravel provisions protecting multiple children across the extended family, including, notably, Desmond's own stepdaughter. The distribution meeting, when it finally occurred, lasted considerably less time than Desmond had apparently anticipated. My parents, confronted with the internal contradiction in his proposed argument, formally reaffirmed the trust's inclusive language, explicitly naming both Milo and Desmond's stepdaughter as protected beneficiaries under the original founding intent. Desmond didn't speak to me for several months after that meeting, and I want to be honest that I didn't particularly go out of my way to repair that silence. Some family relationships, I've learned, aren't actually worth the effort of rebuilding, especially when the person on the other end was willing to weaponize a 4-year-old's paper plate request as the opening move in a strategy designed to quietly cut that same child out of a family inheritance. We still attend the same family gatherings, my brother and I, though our conversations have narrowed considerably to polite, careful small talk. Milo, now 6, doesn't remember the barbecue incident at all, too young at the time for the moment to leave any lasting impression, and I've made a quiet, determined effort to keep it that way, protecting him from ever needing to understand exactly how close he came to losing something Desmond apparently believed he had every right to quietly take. I think, sometimes, about that paper plate, held out by a small, hopeful hand toward a grill full of burgers he had every right to expect, and I think about how a single careless, cruel sentence at a summer barbecue ended up unraveling considerably more than my brother could have possibly anticipated, when he decided my son's plate needed a different rule than everyone else's. He wanted to teach my son a lesson about who counted in this family. He ended up teaching himself a considerably more expensive one instead.